Can we get a broad video about car radios? Well, it's simpler than you would think. You see, car or mobile radios are actually the radios that most people are going to be using in SHTF or camping situations. To turn it on, you literally just turn it on. That is because I have it hard lined to my battery, which I'll show you now. Going through the door, I have it hooked up to my battery. That way I have no need for batteries or worrying about it ever discharging. Well, if you know anything about radios, you'll know that it needs an antenna. Well, once you look out the other side, I have the antenna line going up and through my door, which comes back out of the door. You follow that line all the way back up and you come back to see my short little NMO quarter wave antenna. Now remember, your antenna is the most important part of your radio. The tuning on it is going to greatly affect what it is you're going to be able to receive and transmit on. That being said, with it here, this is a GMRS specific antenna for my GMRS specific mobile radio. This MXT 500 is $400, and turning it on, you'll see that there's actually only 32 channels. And whenever you go on there, it does have a plethora of options that do make the radio a bit better, and it is easily programmable through a computer with free software. There's all sorts of mobile radios, but the main two you're going to use is GMRS and amateur radio mobile radios. This being a GMRS radio and this being an amateur radio. Amateur, or ham, radio sits between 144 and 148 megahertz and 420 and 450 megahertz, while GMRS takes place within 22/30 channels. The radios that you'll find, like this one, are usually about 25, or like the one in the car, 50 watts. They always require some sort of connection, like I showed you in a car, that requires you to be powered on. If unlocked, these mobile radios are able to talk on a vast amount of frequencies, those including MERS, GMRS, amateur radio, not within the policies and procedures of the FCC, but it is physically possible. And then finally, you have the CB mobile radios. These are your standard, what people would call trucker radios. These talk on a very low band in the 27 megahertz range and can be prone to 11 meter skipping, or DX for the amateur radio nerds. While things like this radio and the other radio I was showing you takes place within 136 megahertz up to 520 megahertz, basically making them line of sight. Meaning, if my radio can see your radio, it'll be able to talk. But remember, this is limited up to 25 to 50 watts, while the CBs, well, they're limited up to 4 watts. Meaning, in short distance communications, amateur and GMRS radio totally takes the win. But when you start depending on long range communications, basing it off of skip, well, that's when CB starts to take the win. Not to mention, it's very common to have single sideband on CB, and while you're allowed to have single sideband on amateur radio, it is not common on 2 meters and 70 centimeters. You can make your mobile kit look very subdued and unnoticeable, and with that means that you'll have more stable communications without it interfering with your vehicle. Not to mention, if you get a mobile GMRS or amateur radio, you're going to get the full 50 or 25 watts it claims to have. You know, because it's hooked up to your car battery, it's going to provide a lot of power.